Hey everyone, welcome. This is Ben Zinn with NextLevelGuitar.com. Thank you for joining us today. We're continuing in our series with an in-depth look at effects pedals and how to integrate our playing with the sounds that these various different effects provide for us. In this lesson, we are going to take a look at the differences between overdrive, distortion, and fuzz effects, how to set those up, how to dial in our tone, and some different ways to look at application for each of these effects. Let's talk about the gear that we're using today. As far as guitar, we have a 96 Les Paul Standard here, and we're running into our pedal board, running into all of our various drive effects, overdrive, fuzz, and distortion, into the front of a Dr. Z Carmen Gia amp. Nothing in the effects loop, so pretty straightforward setup. The pedals that we'll be highlighting in this lesson are the Small Sound Big Sound Mini, the JHS Kilt, the Astro Fuzz Clone, and the DoD Gunslinger Distortion. The basic difference between overdrive, distortion, and fuzz. I'm going to focus more on the application side of things as opposed to the technical, but overdrive oftentimes refers to pushing the front end of the amp. I think it's at its best as an effect when you are using an overdrive or boost pedal to push the front end of an already saturated tube amp. That's typically the application for overdrive. Distortion is oftentimes gets used interchangeably with overdrive, but it really is a different type of effect. A distortion effect is going to have more of a drastic tonal difference than overdrive. It's going to have a little bit more saturation and gain in the effect, and it's going to color your sound differently. So in terms of how you use distortion as opposed to overdrive, there's going to be some different applications there. One other thing I think is worth pointing out, differences between overdrive and distortion. Overdrive, I typically like to find the sweet spot on the overdrive pedal in terms of gain, and I like to use it either at that sweet spot or below. As opposed to distortion effect, once you find that sweet spot, wherever your ear tells you where that is, I like to use the sweet spot and above for a distortion type effect. So you can think about it in this way. Overdrive, you have the most and you're going to back off of it maybe, and distortion, you have the sweet spot and you're going to goose it even more. So it's a good way to kind of think about the differentiation between those two effects. And lastly, you have fuzz, which is going to have the most drastic coloration on your tone. This is one of the earliest guitar effects, and it's going to change the character of your guitar tone almost completely. Right now I have my amp set up relatively clean. So a little bit of grit, but mostly clean. Now if I engage the JHS Kilt, we'll get a little bit of overdrive here. Pretty happening tone, but let's say we have that as a rhythm tone and we need to take it up a notch. We're all the way on our volume here and we need a little bit more gain for, let's say, a lead boost. What you can do is set up an overdrive before the overdrive that's on, right? So right now I have, in my signal chain, I have my Small Sound Big Sound Mini followed by the JHS Kilt. The JHS Kilt is on currently. And I have an overdriven tone. So if I engage the Small Sound Big Sound Mini in front of the JHS, now all of a sudden I can get into more of a distortion kind of territory or a lead boost. So one application I might use for this is to have an already overdriven sound with one overdrive pedal for rhythm, and then the second overdrive pedal is coming before that already engaged pedal, and it's off to start, and then I'll kick it on to add more gain into the other overdrive. This is goosing the overdrive or cascaded overdrive. Sometimes you hear this referred to. And this is a great way to go from like a crunchy overdriven tone to more of a lead tone. You almost kind of get into the distortion territory this way. So for example, a rhythm tone here. Now with the second pedal. And then back off for a rhythm kind of tone. So this is a nice way to set up your overdrive pedals if you have more clean headroom with your amp. The same concept holds true if you stick a boost pedal in before an overdrive pedal. You can get a similar type of effect. In this case, I'm using the JHS Kilt, which has a boost circuit built into it, but I'm putting the boost circuit before the overdrive circuit. So again, we'll do something similar, a rhythm tone and then a boost going into the overdrive circuit. So this is a great way to set up overdrives, I think, if you're dealing with a cleaner front end of your amp. If you have two of them, you can get them working in conjunction with one another, or an overdrive or a boost. Just a separate way, kind of a separate approach from thinking about the overdrive going into an already saturated amp. Here we have our clean tone, and here we have the DoD Gunslinger distortion pedal. You can hear straight away there's already more saturation, more distortion happening, and so stylistically I think this gets us into a little bit of a different world that's more of an aggressive sound, and so we're thinking a little bit more in terms of rock, hard rock, metal, and those kind of tones immediately. And I think for application purposes, whereas with the overdrive you might ease up on the playing dynamics to create more of a clean tone, that's not really the approach with overdrive. You're typically going to be playing a little bit more aggressively, and if anything, rather than easing up on the picking attack, you might lay into it a little bit more to produce more harmonics, right? As you have those sort of harmonic type approaches are going to be easier to achieve, I think, when you have a distortion sound as opposed to an overdrive sound. So yeah, I mean, this is just about, you know, in this case I have the gain set up to about 65%, and I can use that for a rhythm approach like that, or again a lead approach. You can also goose the front of a distortion pedal with a boost if you want to achieve a little bit more gain. And finally, let's talk about fuzz. Fuzz is a wonderful effect, one of the earlier guitar effects to ever come out, and it's kind of its own thing in terms of the sound. It's going to alter the tone, I think, the most drastically compared to distortion and overdrive circuits, and it has a ton of wonderful applications all across stylistically, from 60s rock, British Invasion stuff, psychedelic music, on through to some of today's more pioneering harder rock bands. So it just kind of all is about your creativity and how you dial it in, like any of these effects. But we're going to take a look at a few different fuzz tones now. First up, we have an Astro Fuzz clone, and this is going to be a little more of a traditional 60s style fuzz. And what we're looking for when we're using this type of fuzz, I think, is a really buzzy, fizzy, fuzzy kind of tone, right? Like, how do you describe fuzz? the name says it all. It's fuzzy, right? You can use it as a rhythm or a lead tone. And I love the way two notes interact when you're playing double stops with a fuzz. The small sound, big sound mini pedal has a voltage starve feature, which essentially you're depriving the pedal of power. Oftentimes, back when effects pedals were just battery operated, people, I think by a happy accident, found some really cool tones when the 9-volt battery was starting to die, and they found that their pedal, when it was not supplied with enough power, created a completely different sound than when you put a fresh battery in it. And so this pedal manufacturer sort of replicates this by having a knob that allows you to sag or starve the pedal. And to me, it sounds like fuzz when you do this. So while it's technically an overdrive, I think we kind of get into fuzz territory. And here's that tone. Some of the Voodoo Lab pedal power units too also have this feature, if you have them on your pedal board, where you can turn down a knob to reduce the voltage that you're sending to the pedal. So again, just another way to achieve that tone. Or if you want to be super authentic, just let that 9-volt battery die and you can get that same thing happening. Lastly, in terms of fuzz, the JHS Kilt has another option on it. When you have a couple of the knobs set in the right way, it unlocks what's called the forbidden tone from the Expandora pedal. And this is, again, a pretty wild, gnarly, kind of gated fuzz sound. Hopefully a little bit more perspective on the differences between overdrive and boost, to distortion and to fuzz, and all of the different applications. They're all wonderful effects that we can use in our guitar playing, and all of them have a wide variety of applications. So thanks so much for checking out this lesson. Once again, Ben Zinn here for nextlevelguitar.com, and I'll see you next time.